Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast formerly known as Pointing Left. This is episode 25 for Tuesday, February 6, 2018. I'm your host, Serena Blaze. I cover news and opinion by and for my fellow lefties in Oklahoma, and maybe for some others who might have an open mind or just want to do some opposition research. I don't know what gives me the gall to do this, except that I'm loud and pushy at this point in my life. I'm what I like to call an accidental Okie. I arrived in 2003, never intending to stay here, yet here I am. I arrived a lefty, and I'm still a lefty. Maybe even more committed and adamant lefty due to Oklahoma. Yes, OK does radicalize some of us, and not to the right. Maybe that goes back to the state's very radical lefty roots, which far too few Oklahomans today, even born and bred here, even know about. But that's a story for another episode. As I said, this used to be Pointing Left, but now, through the magic of digital communication, the ghost of Woody Guthrie, and some appropriately brick-colored fairy dust, we're transforming into swoop, swish, poof, Left in Oklahoma. That's right, Left in Oklahoma. I always like to focus on grassroots activist news, but this episode is going to be dominated by the opening of the legislative session and the concerns progressive activists and others have about how the legislature will address our serious budget problems. So I start off with my call to action, which was inspired by the banner drop by Indigenous activists during Governor Mary Fallon's State of the State address on Monday. Surely you've heard about that, but I'll fill you in. After I run through some news headlines, I'll have some great progressive bills to share with you, those being sponsored by Representative Colin Walke, Democrat from Oklahoma City. They are 7 measures which will help working families and that we can all get behind, which is a nice break from so much legislation in Oklahoma that we have to oppose most of the time. And then I have a pretty amazing op-ed to share with you. It's written by Republican Representative Leslie Osborne. And it isn't often that I will promote something from a Republican, but this is really a stunner and shows that even legislators can learn on the job. So don't miss that. We will also look at reactions to the Step Up plan, the bill package put together by Oklahoma business leaders, supposedly to lead us out of the wilderness, the budget wilderness. And yes, the budget wilderness that they let us into, but never mind the man behind the curtain. Finally, some reactions to the governor's State of the State address that don't involve banners. So that's the show. That's Left in Oklahoma, episode 25. Oh, wait. Should I start over with the episode numbers? Uh-oh. Didn't factor that into my fairy dust. Oh well, let's get started, whatever the number is. It's a complaint as old as protest itself. Your tactics are wrong. You are too strident, too radical. Be rational, they say, which means to think like those who get to decide what rational means. They say, to be heard, to be allowed a seat at the table, you must be respectful. What they don't acknowledge is that metaphorical table is a myth. The power it represents is already allocated, assigned, or obtained. Good behavior, being defined by those at the table, of course, does not buy you a ticket. No, these shushes, stifles, and not now, not here directives are the complaints of someone who, well, probably has few complaints about the status quo. People who resort to attention-getting tactics do so for a very real and obvious reason. They are not getting heard. Their group, their community, their issue is never represented at the table in any meaningful way, usually not at all. They are invisible for all extents and purposes. And when you are invisible and unheard, you do things that are attention-getting and unconventional, which by its very definition is contrary to convention, the characteristic of blending in. What has always been true in this country, which began by demanding liberty and justice for all landed white men, is that democracy is aspirational, and rights and representation must be demanded and acquired through struggles that are combated with propaganda, mountains of money, and blood if necessary. The first volleys to stop dissent are always in the nature of what is now called tone policing. It's amazing how effective this still is. Don't fall for it. But despite many progressive advances over the years, the elite power center reestablishes itself over and over, with the vast majority on the outside quibbling over scraps. Really, oligarchs reign today as completely as any feudal king. It's their economy, their media, their Congress. They think it's their world. The military, law enforcement, the courts, and the capitalist parameters of our civil society are all geared to serve that elite, to protect or expand their property and rights. Schools are run, elections are held, jails are filled, and wars are fought with the underlying aim and ultimate result of keeping those in power in power. But you mustn't say so, mustn't complain. Power doesn't want to hear your cry of frustration or pain, and it sure doesn't want to see you display an embarrassing public message all over its fancy table. Yesterday, 3 Indigenous women dropped a banner in the Oklahoma Legislative Chamber as Governor Mary Fallin gave her State of the State address, primarily to the government leaders who work in the Capitol and who, collectively, are responsible for the decimation of our state for the benefit of a handful of oil and gas barons. It was a glorious act of defiance and self-affirmation, of the right to be seen, heard, considered, included. But many have condemned them for violating the supposed sanctity of that space and event, for being disrespectful. Really? Let me just hearken back to the historic struggles against tyranny by Jesus of Nazareth, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., among the best known, and say that there is a big difference between peaceful and respectful. I'm a believer in and advocate for nonviolence, but I will not respect what is fundamentally unjust, abhorrent, selfish, and cruel. If you are speaking against this action because of the tactics used, I urge you to think again and consider that historic context. Here's some context too. Our schools are grossly underfunded, our teachers holding charity drives for supplies. But be respectful to those who made it so. Our sick and elderly are suffering unduly, but be respectful to those who literally took away their food and health care. The very foundations of our homes have been riddled with cracks caused by horizontal drilling, but be respectful to those who gave this practice the green light and a big tax break along with it. All this and more abuses have been showered on the people of this state, the powerless people. To call it disrespect doesn't begin to cover it. I've previously shared on this podcast some thoughts on this political power imbalance, my own thoughts, but mostly those of people more clever and articulate about it than I am, about how power has been more and more concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. I'll continue to do so, not because I didn't already know that and figure you do too, but it's a matter of keeping sane in an insane situation. With most of our so-called representatives, our so-called business leaders, our media, our entertainment and culture complicit in perpetrating something unbearable to witness and unsustainable to our state, country, and earth itself. It's about not letting the dominant paradigm get by without comment, without resistance. Resistance is not a buzzword. It's a matter of life and death. Dropping a well-timed, well-positioned banner is one thing you can do. There are many others. Rally, write a letter, demand accountability of those who purport to serve you, support the defiant, expose corruption with whistleblowing from the inside, run for office as an incorruptible. In the converse, refuse to participate in exploitation whenever possible, boycott or strike destructive or discriminatory businesses, reject expectations of compliance with the status quo. But don't ever yield to the demand to be rational and respectful to those who are destroying our land, our welfare, our health, our liberty, or our very lives. In the face of our circumstances in Oklahoma and beyond, be as revoltingly revolutionary as necessary. They are, by design, few. We are, by damn, many. Join us, the many, and fight for what's rightfully ours. So there you go. We'll be right back with more about the 2018 legislative session. So stay tuned. We'll just have a quick breather. I'm going to get now to the headlines. A few headlines I picked out and wanted to share with you. We'll just cover brief tidbits of each of these. You can explore more if you're interested. Okay, so first of all, this is a News OK story by Randy Ellis, published on January 30th. Rapist gets probation for attack on 13-year-old at Baptist church camp in Oklahoma. Now, you've probably heard about this on mainstream news sources. It was all over Facebook. People were understandably outraged about the light sentence. So this light sentence, it was credited to the fact that the rapist is blind. News of the light sentence, considering the brutality of the attack and age of the victim, provoked, as I said, a huge backlash, and subsequent reports soon came out saying that the Murray County Assistant DA was forced to resign, and he was apparently the person who shepherded through this deal that got this guy off on probation. That didn't calm things down much. People are also questioning the role of the DA in the matter, and I suspect this story is not over yet. Okay, next story is Amtrak for train. I know I have some train lovers that are listening to my show. I'm a train lover as well. I love Amtrak. It's such a great way to travel. So much less stressful than going by air anymore. So here's a story. It's from KMUW, which is Wichita's NPR station, and the reporter is Tom Shine. Amtrak to conduct study on expanding passenger rail service to Wichita and Newton. So they're moving ahead with the feasibility study regarding a possible extension of the Heartline Flyer route, and that would be very good news for Oklahoma, people that are heading north. So keep an eye on that. And finally, a story, this is from going back a little bit to January 23rd. Inmate dies after being found unresponsive at Cleveland County Detention Center. This is from KOCO News. So the story is that a 35-year-old man named Marconia Kessee, Kessee, he was taken into the Cleveland County Detention Center and was dead within 2 hours. So that is being investigated. Local activists are demanding that the Norman police officers involved in the incident be fired. along with reforms at that Cleveland County Detention Center, better training for police in dealing with the mentally ill. That's how he got into the system. There's a backstory. You can check into it. But at any rate, the fact that he died is very disturbing. And just a note that activists have informed us that there's no citizen advisory board down there in that community, in that district, similar to what there is here in Oklahoma City. So that is a reform that is also being pushed. And there's going to be an action around this situation. It's going to be Friday, February 10th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And that will be at the Cleveland County Jail, which is at 2550 West Franklin Road in Norman. So if you're concerned about that incident or other incidents like it, and really sort of a epidemic situation we've got with jails, detention centers, just the conditions, the treatment is really problematic. There's just too many incidents that are like this one, and something needs to be done about it, and so these activists are doing that. So those are the headlines. I also have a little new feature I thought would be fun to do. Meme of the week. And so my meme of the week this week is Republicans went from Blue Lives Matter to the FBI sucks pretty damn fast, don't you think? And that's a hat tip to New Century Times on that. And if you want to see the graphic element to that meme, you can check the website. Will be on oklahomaactivist.com until we get our leftinoklahoma.com website set up. And finally, I have a history milestone for you, kind of a sad one. February 6 marks 42 years since Leonard Peltier was extradited from Canada to stand trial in the U.S. In April 1977, he was condemned to 2 life sentences in the death of 2 FBI special agents, Jack R. Kohler and Ronald A. Williams, on the Pine Ridge Reservation in North Dakota during a shootout with members of the American Indian Movement. So it's widely believed that case was riddled with inconsistencies and corruption, manufactured evidence, coerced testimony, manipulation of the federal justice system in order to secure a conviction of the case with, that concern of 2 FBI agents dying. And so the FBI is adamant that Peltier will never get out of prison, and presidents of both parties have lacked the political courage to seriously consider clemency. Amnesty International has designated Leonard Peltier as a political prisoner of the United States. And at this time, Leonard is 73 years old. He's suffering from heart disease. He's had heart surgery, major heart surgery. His next scheduled parole hearing is in 2024. So it appears likely that he will die in federal custody. Now I've got that promised op-ed from Leslie Osborne, Representative Leslie Osborne. She represents District 47, which is the Mustang area. This piece appeared on February 4th. I'll tell you later where it appeared. In 2012, I helped author a bill to enact triggered income tax cuts, which are future tax cuts enacted when state revenues meet certain thresholds. The bill became law. 5 years later, I find myself spending most of my time as a state legislator trying to clean up what I had a large hand in creating. Since we enacted the tax cuts, Oklahoma hasn't experienced the promised surge in economic growth. What we have experienced are large, persistent shortfalls that have led to drastic cuts to K-12 education and other vital state services. As we prepared to pass the tax cuts, we worked with Art Laffer and other experts to design a tax cut trigger we believed would be foolproof. As it turned out, we were wrong. I truly believed at that time that we needed to pass the tax cuts. I now realize we didn't have all the information we needed to enact successful tax policy. Furthermore, I am convinced that there is simply no way to account for everything you would need to know to create a safe tax cut trigger that would only reduce taxes when it makes sense to do so. There is no way to predict or account for all the state, national, and global economic factors that play into a state's revenue stream. For example, there was no way for us in Oklahoma to know that Iran would pump millions of gallons of oil into the black market and cause U.S. oil prices to plummet. The free fall of the price of oil had a tremendous negative effect on our state's economy. However, because of the parameters we set in our tax cut triggers, we cut taxes right as the economy tanked. We were set to enact another triggered tax cut in 2017 as we faced a $1.1 billion state revenue shortfall. Thankfully, we were able to muster enough votes in the legislature to repeal the triggered tax cut and stave off additional budgetary damage. I am now of the belief that by using tax cut triggers, states are setting themselves up for failure because they are setting future policy on autopilot while not truly understanding what the future holds. That's why I'd strongly encourage Nebraska lawmakers to resist calls to adopt triggered tax cuts. Tax cut triggers tie our hands as policymakers. They prevent us from making decisions in real time and with the information we need to make policy choices that best serve our state and our constituents. Why would we use triggers when every year we can make tax changes using current data that reflects the current state of affairs in our state? I plan to keep an eye on Nebraska this year and hope your legislators will use more caution than we did. Taking a more prudent approach to tax policy can help your state avoid the persistent problems and damage that tax cut triggers have wrought here. Now, obviously, this is somewhat addressed to Nebraska lawmakers. It appeared in the Chadron, Chadron record, which is a Nebraska newspaper. If I understand correctly, it was reprinted where I saw it in the Rapid City Journal. But at any rate, it's real interesting. And I don't remember in 2012 what was going on when this bill went through, but I would almost guarantee you that there were legislators that were telling the people behind this bill, including Leslie Osborne, everything she has since learned. I would just guarantee you that they were begging them to pay attention to those factors. But some people have to do lots of damage before they learn, and apparently Leslie Osborne is one of them. Kudos to her. She's at least recognized her error. Let's hope that the others have done the same, and we can get somewhere in this state and resolve some of these problems in a meaningful way and make it fair. So, all right, next I'm going to tell you about the bills from Colin Walkie that make up the Oklahoma Values Package. Actually, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to let Colin Walkie himself tell you, and this is from the press conference he had on this past Monday to introduce the bills. So let's hear from Colin, and then I'll go over some of the details of the bills.
First and foremost, I want to thank all of the workers that stand here behind me today, including those that are behind the cameras, that are here in support of what I am calling the Oklahoma Values Package. I invited you here today to talk about the Oklahoma Values Package because our state motto is that labor conquers all. And yet, even though we value labor here in the state of Oklahoma, our legislature has failed miserably in actually supporting the workers of this state, and I personally aim to change that. Just like last year, I'm running a paid sick leave bill. We're in the midst of a particularly bad year for the flu. Hourly workers are faced with the tough choice of going to work sick or staying home and not getting paid. In Oklahoma, an estimated 44% of private sector workers lack paid sick leave. Employees without paid sick leave are estimated to have 1.5 times more likely than people with paid sick leave to go to work with a contagious illness like the flu. Earned sick leave will reduce healthcare expenditures by ensuring that individuals get preventative care and health care that they need. Additionally, it is estimated that there is over $200 billion per year lost in productivity due to individuals coming to work sick. My bill provides symbiotic benefits to both the employers and the employees. This is because the employees save money through not losing productivity, and the employees are able to go ahead and go get the health care that they need to be effective for their employers. This bill seems like common sense to me. Additionally, I'm running a pay transparency bill. That bill would ensure equal pay for equal work irrespective of the gender of the employee. Representative Jason Dunnington has worked diligently on this bill for several years in the past, and yet Representative Elise Hall has refused to consider this bill for a hearing. Now, why Representative Hall would not want equal pay for equal work is beyond me, but I think it's about time that she gives that bill a hearing here in the state legislature. In 2017, 3 bills were ran to raise the minimum wage in the state of Oklahoma, and not a single one received a hearing. As a result, this year I'm running my own minimum wage bill that would raise the minimum wage to $11 per hour. That would bring in an estimated $7,800 in additional income for working men and women of this state. And that is important because it would not only allow them to pay more for services and goods in the state of Oklahoma, but it would also allow them to save money for unexpected expenditures like house repairs or car repairs. Additionally, it would mean a larger tax base for the state of Oklahoma. Finally, I am proposing 2 bills that will increase revenue in the state of Oklahoma that will be beneficial not only for teacher pay raises, but state employee pay raises as well. They have gone about a decade without a state employee pay raise, and I think that it is important that we see to it that happens. The 2 bills that I am running with regard to increasing revenue for the state of Oklahoma are the gross production tax bill, which would raise the gross production tax in the state of Oklahoma to 7%. Additionally, I'm requesting that we require corporations to do combined corporate reporting. The GPT at 7% would bring in an estimated $300 million in additional revenue for the state of Oklahoma, which is more than enough for a $5,000 teacher pay raise across the board. Additionally, combined corporate income reporting would bring in an estimated $50 to $100 million per year. So at the end of the day, if we truly want to live up to the Oklahoma standard that labor conquers all, it's about time that we actually start supporting the workers of this state. And that's why I'm so appreciative to those workers that showed up here today, and for those of you that are in the back, and for those that couldn't make it here today. Because we're out here fighting for you, and we're going to do everything that we can to make Oklahoma a better place for you.
Okay, so the bill specifically, let me tell you, there's as he said, some of them he didn't actually mention all of the ones. Just in the interest of time, he said he was kind of shortcutting it. But these are the bills that are new bills that are introduced in the 2018 session, ordered sequentially. They're numbered sequentially here, starting with the House Bill 2531, and there are 5 of them. And the first one, 2531. 7% gross production tax. 2532 is combined corporate income tax. 2533 raised the minimum wage to $11, and if enacted, that would go into effect immediately in, I guess, 2019, if it passed this year. 2534 is gender pay equity and pay transparency. And 2535 is it's bill source disclosure. In other words, if a bill is being, if a legislator is proposing a bill that, say, was actually written by ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is a conservative business, corporate-oriented organization that does just that. It writes generic bills and then sends them out across the country to try to get them passed in state legislators. So if that were the case, or if it came from some other source, the sponsor would need to disclose the source of the bill. So that's kind of an interesting transparency and accountability measure involved with attached to some of these other bills that are more directly tied to helping Oklahoma families, but I think it really does play in there because so many bills are so destructive to families and workers that do come from places like Alex. So it's important to know where they're coming from so we can get after them before they become law. And then also in the package are two bills that were actually introduced in the 2017 session but are being carried over, and that's HB 1310, paid sick leave, and HB 1311, which would restore the Earned Income Tax Credit refund. So there's a group I'm involved with called Our Revolution Oklahoma. They are going to be behind this package and doing some work around each of the specific bills. So as that work happens, you can find more information at ourrevolutionok.com. All right, so I'm going to take a break, and then we'll be back to talk about the Step Up plan and some very strong reactions to it, as well as other reactions to Governor Fallon's State of the State address. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
One cup of coffee, 150. Guy who picked the coffee didn't get three. Stuck in the belly of an industry that doesn't care about people. Working on the hills on stolen land, picking at the earth with a scuffed bare hand, sweating for the profits of some rich man that doesn't care about people. Buy a piece of fruit at the grocery store, shipped from Guatemala, Chile, or El Salvador. Grown by orphan children of the Civil War that was funded by fruit corporations. A global trade system riding on the backs of families packed in wallless shacks, living in the fear of death squad attacks that are funded by fruit corporations. One pack of t-shirts, $4.50. Girl who sewed the t-shirts didn't get three, and she's trying to survive in an industry that doesn't care about people. Bangladesh factory, 16-hour shifts, no overtime breaks or benefits, and they'll fire her if she gets pregnant, cause they don't care about people. New York banks watch a Thai baht grow, then they took high amounts in Thai baht loans, converted them to dollars when they got back home, and it put millions into poverty. They paid off their debts with U.S. cash, pocketed the profits in U.S. banks, and the Southeast Asian market crashed, and they put millions into poverty. One diamond ring, a few grand. Kid who mined the diamonds lost his hand as a message from the soldiers who run the land that are funded by diamond corporations. Wealth derived through poverty from the lingering cuts of slavery in the form of an export economy controlled by diamond corporations. Imperialism in its modern form, deadlock, free market, economic reform, blowing through the global south like a tropical storm, tearing at the seams of culture, from the cluster bomb to the rifle butt, from the gold mine to the clear cut. Capitalism's got the world locked up, and it's tearing at the seams of culture.
Well, that's Ryan Harvey laying down some truth about the global economy. And speaking of music, I'm looking for some independent songwriters who will let me use their original music that's somewhat politically themed on my podcast. So if you know anybody, if you are such a person, please get in touch with me. All right, back to the news. Okay, so let's talk about the Step Up Oklahoma plan, because everyone else is. Basically, because it was proposed by the oligarchs, the business leaders, the big shots that pretty much think they can get whatever they want in Oklahoma, because basically that's been the way it's been working out for them. So this, just to review about this plan, Step Up Oklahoma, it's called, they formed a coalition, if you want to call it that. It's quote unquote, a bipartisan group of business and civic leaders and organizations, which not very diverse. A lot of folks that are definitely stakeholders in this situation were not included because, well, as mentioned earlier, they never are. So they put together a plan, has a lot of parts in it, and this group of people is pretty much a Republican group. I mean, there might be a token or two in there, but it's basically business people that are worried about their bottom line, and they are basically a little unnerved by the grassroots effort to get the 7% GPT enshrined. And there's an initiative to get that on the ballot. And if it does, frankly, it will pass. So that's what they're worried about. They're seeking to stave that off. And so this plan includes a doubling. It is technically a doubling of the GPT from 2% to 4%. But 4% is a long way from 7%, which is kind of already the compromise point for many people. It's about as low as they want to go. So, but just to round out some of the other things in this plan, just for clarity, it does, on the plus side, it finally does recognize that there needs to be substantial new revenue for the state. For some reason, that has been difficult for people to come to, but pretty much that's a consensus now. We need permanent new revenues. The only debate is how do we generate those things. And so this plan has a combination of higher taxes and the elimination of various tax breaks. Support for schools. It will include raises for state workers, more support for schools. Are not spelled out in it in detail, but the taxes include a raise in the cigarette tax, the motor fuel tax. Those I support the latter and not the former, but both of those seem to have pretty widespread support. But one thing that's been pointed out that's not getting a lot of promotion is that, and this was pointed out to, a letter to the editor of the Norman transcript by Chadwick Cox. He points out that the Step of Oklahoma is commonly referred to as a budget plan, he says, and primarily discussed as a financial plan to increase the revenue stream, but very little is mentioned about the changes suggested for government structure, such as the appointment of agency heads and restructuring the judicial system. It will, so he points that out and also refers back in his letter to a previous letter written by former Commissioner Bob Anthony, also in the transcript, that the plan provides the governor with appointment power of the commissioners to the Oklahoma Corporation Committee, and goes back over some history. I won't go into the details. You can look for that letter in the transcript, but apparently there's quite a corrupt history in Oklahoma, and the current structure of the election of commissioners is a part of a reform that came about because of really just horrendous corruption that was going on. So we need to dig into the details of that plan a little bit before it's just signed off on and rubber stamped by the legislature, which the Republican leadership of the legislature seems to want to fast track that thing. So basically, do your homework and contact your representative and your senator before this becomes a fait accompli. So there's a group that has formed of grassroots activists in response to the Step Up Oklahoma plan, and they're calling it, the plan is Step Up Oklahoma. This grassroots group is called Stand Up Oklahoma. And I'm reading from their Facebook page on this. They are on the no side of taking this plan as a total package. So here's what they say: cutting our way to prosperity doesn't work. Oklahoma is 47% in taxes per capita, but that is skewed by the obscene amount of corporate welfare handed out to Harold Hamm, Larry Nichols, and other greedy billionaires. And of course, these are the folks at the top of the Step Up Oklahoma plan. Back to Stand Up Oklahoma. Let's be clear. Middle class and poor Oklahomans pay their fair share in taxes. The rich oil barons don't. As succinctly stated in the Lost Ogle, nicely packaged in shiny wrapping paper by a PR firm, the Oklahoman, the plan is billed as nonpartisan, comprehensive solution to increase state revenues, fund 5,000 teacher pay raises, and reform state and county government, unquote. But in reality, the Lost Ogle says it's just another attempt by the people who run this state to expand a conservative pro-corporate agenda and maintain their power and control over Oklahoma government. 70% of Oklahomans want the GPT restored to 7%, yet all 4 living Oklahoma Democratic governors have endorsed Hamm and Nichols' Step Up Oklahoma 4% GPT plan. The remaining details of the plan, while pitched as nonpartisan effort to hold the legislators accountable, are power grabs by the extreme right and elite class to take away power from the people, the only ones who actually hold our legislators accountable. They intend to lower the supermajority threshold for monetary legislation, removing any relevance from the minority voice, tax gas at the pump, tax cigarettes, tax renewable energy, and raise the GPT to a measly 4%, after which they will retreat into their ivory towers and say, "We did it! We raised the GPT, now leave us alone." Now that's the end of the quote from the Lost Ogle. So back to Stand Up Oklahoma. We encourage you to stand up, Oklahoma. Get it? Don't fall for this scam. Encourage your legislators, friends, and family to take a stand. Stand up to the overlords that rule this state. Stand up to big oil. Stand up to being nickeled and hammed for every last penny. Stand up, Oklahoma. Join us in standing up against oligarchical posturing and in presenting a plan of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's beyond time we move forward into some real revenue solutions, not ones cherry-picked by the same billionaires who have been lifting from our pockets for decades. Stand up, Oklahoma. And they advise people to, as I do, call your legislators and tell them to hold out and vote no on this bill. Tell them that 70% of Oklahomans want a 7% GPT, and anything less is highway robbery. So that was from Stand Up Oklahoma. Thank you very much for the rallying cry. I hope people listen. But, you know, those are the dirty hippies, right? I'm one of them, so I can say that. But what do the respectable people have to say? Like other legislators who have gone through the process of getting elected or endorsed thereby by the people in their district. What do some of them have to say? Well, we actually found one that had something very strong to say. I would suggest that it is just as strong, if not stronger, than what Stand Up Oklahoma is saying. So you listen to Corey Williams, representative from the Stillwater area, Democrat, what he had to say about the Step Up plan.
That being said, the 4% is not a compromise. It should be restored to the 7% rate. And you don't just have to ask me, you can ask Oklahoma. It polls very well. This Step Up Oklahoma plan that you see before you is nothing more than a ploy by the oil and gas industry to avoid a ballot issue in November where Oklahomans overwhelmingly will adopt a restoration of the gross production tax to a 7%, which is a reasonable tax rate, which would put us in line not only with the regional average, but other energy-producing states in the nation. Whereas right now, we are the lowest, and we will still remain inequitably low, which means that we are subsidizing Devon's ability to drill in New Mexico and Continental's ability to drill in South Dakota, and everyone else's ability to drill in states where their severance tax is much higher. Again, to what Representative Perryman said, if we really want parity, I do believe the wind industry is willing to give them parity. But let's all remember that the 2% they enjoy now and the 4% that we are discussing is in lieu of property tax. That was a deal struck long ago. And if I have to hear Chairman Rainbolt tell me that we should be taxing wind because we made a bad deal with wind a long time ago, I would remind him this state made a really bad deal with oil and gas at one point in time, and we refuse to admit that mistake and address it going forward. 1% on horizontals was a joke. We need to get it back to 7% so we can fund our kids adequately.
So, thankfully, some Oklahoma legislators, some Democrats, opposition party, remember, have a clear perception of what needs to happen and aren't just giving in to these reduced numbers that will favor the oil and gas industry. I'm not going to name any names right now, but they've made public statements, so you figure it out. And frankly, if they are your representative and you don't like it, please let them know. Make them be accountable. But at any rate, thank you, Corey Williams. And here's another reaction I want to share with you, more of a long-form op-ed. This is from Mark Davies. This is actually going back to January 19th, shortly after the release of the plan, and it's part one in what is now a two-part. Maybe it will end up being more parts as he continues to address the step-up plan and problems with it, but this was one I'm going to share with you now is dated January 19th, and it's from Mark's blog, which is oneworldhouse.net, oneworldhouse.net, and the name of this is Oklahoma Stepping Up. So let's hear what Mark has to say. Look, I get Oklahoma politics. I understand that the oil and gas industry has more economic and political power than any other entity in the state. I understand that no major revenue bill will likely ever make it through the Oklahoma legislature without the approval of the leaders of our large oil and gas companies. It is not surprising, therefore, that it garnered a great deal of attention when the oil and gas industry and their allies announced their Step Up Oklahoma plan last week to fund teacher pay raises and basic state services. Numerous media outlets and state leaders lauded the executives of the oil and gas industry for being willing to compromise and support an increase in the state's gross production tax from 2% to 4% in the first 36 months of a well's production, by far the most productive period for the well, and then to have it increase to 7% for the rest of the life of the well. Such a compromise, such a sacrifice by the oil and gas industry will cost them $133 million a year compared to what they are currently paying. But these leaders of the Oklahoma oil and gas industry are ready to step up and make the sacrifice for the good of the state. Listening to the news and reading Oklahoma papers, one gets a sense that Oklahoma oil and gas leaders have put their self-interest aside and are taking one for the team. And one gets a sense that Step Up Oklahoma is the best and perhaps last chance we have to fund teacher pay raises and basic state services before the state completely falls apart. Indeed, given the economic and political power of the oil and gas companies, Step Up Oklahoma may end up being the way the state moves forward to address its revenue failure and budget crisis. Given this reality, I understand why the Oklahoma Education Association would support this initiative while continuing to work on other potential solutions to the crisis our state faces. Times are desperate. Teachers are fleeing the state, many school districts have gone to 4-day school weeks, and students are not getting the quality public education they deserve. Similar crises exist across the state in other sectors, such as healthcare and infrastructure. Oklahoma is a failing state on many fronts. The proposal being put forward by the oil and gas industry is better than their previous unwillingness to entertain any restoration of the gross production tax towards its normal 7% rate, a rate that would put Oklahoma more in line with other oil and gas producing states. 4% is better than 2%. $133 million is better than no restoration at all. But let's not fool ourselves into thinking that the oil and gas industry and its leaders who have stepped back for the past decade and employed literally billions of dollars of tax breaks while Oklahoma state spending on public education decreased more than any other state in the country, are somehow now suddenly becoming selfless and sacrificial leaders to save our state. It is much more likely that they are trying to get out ahead of a growing movement in Oklahoma to have oil and state companies pay their fair share, as opposed to enjoying by far the lowest GPT among oil and gas states. What a coincidence that on the day before oil and gas leaders announced their Step Up Oklahoma plan, they lodged a legal challenge to a potential state question that would restore the state's GPT to 7%. The oil and gas industry likely understands that if they don't show some compromise on GPT, that the people may use the initiative petition process to restore the GPT at a rate much higher than what Step Up Oklahoma is proposing. $133 million a year sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but it is still much less than what oil and gas companies would be paying each year with a 7% GPT on all wells, a figure much more in line with other states. The oil and gas industry's Step Up Oklahoma plan still proposes to raise more money through regressive taxes on cigarettes and gas at the pump than it is willing to raise from taxes on oil and gas produced at the well. Far from being a major sacrifice for oil and gas companies, Step Up Oklahoma is a well-calculated move on the part of the industry to appear to be stepping up, even though it has been stepping down for years while our state failed. While I agree that we must all step up for Oklahoma, a much better step up for the common good of all Oklahomans would be for us to step up and restore the gross production tax to 7%, and hopefully Oklahomans will have an option to vote on this restoration in November by passing State Question 795 if the selfless and sacrificial oil and gas industry is not successful in keeping it off the ballot. Okay, so again, that was Mark Davies from his blog, oneworldhouse.net. Thank you, Mark. We'll have the second part of that next week, I think. And last but not least, I want to include a couple reactions to Mary Fallon's State of the State address. The address itself is easily findable if you're interested in what Mary has to say. I would suggest Oklahoma Watch is a good place to get the transcript and or the video of that, and also some of their pre-speech interviews with her and analysis. Very good. I commend that to you. But just some quick reactions. This one is from OK Policy. They sent out a press release, and quoting from that says, while the governor's address identifies the right problems, her budget makes clear that we still have a long way to go to fully solve them. Even with all revenues from the Step Up Oklahoma plan included, Governor Fallon's fiscal year 2019 budget does nothing to increase general support for K-12 schools and higher education that have been cut the most in the nation. It does not address overcrowding and staff shortages in state prisons. It does not provide pay increases for thousands of state workers, many of whom have gone more than a decade without a raise. It does not undo cuts to community health providers or reduce the long developmental disabilities care waiting list. So the problems in Oklahoma are many and very serious, and they are really trying to lowball things and not really get to the heart of it and deal with things in a comprehensive, but in a way that will set things straight in the short term because we really can't afford the long term. We're a failed state. I mean, that's the heart of it. But in the interest of fairness, going to give you the other side of the matter. Here is House Speaker McCall, Charles McCall. He is a Republican. And he issued also a press release to respond to the governor's State of the State address. And I found it very interesting. It's the spin that you might expect. So let me just read it to you and see if anything jumps out at you as you listen to this. And I will tell you at the end what jumped out at me. Governor Fallin outlined our revenue problems and offered several ideas today that many Republicans in the House of Representatives can agree with. I share the governor's belief that Oklahoma citizens want a solution to our budget issues and expect stability in our core government services. A much-needed teacher pay raise is still the top priority for House Republicans, but we need to identify a revenue stream to fund that commitment. The compromise revenue package crafted by the Step Up Coalition is a solution. This plan will get a hearing in the House of Representatives, and lawmakers will have an opportunity early in the legislative session to deliver for our citizens. I understand that House Democrats have some concerns with the package. To be clear, House Republicans certainly don't like everything in the coalition's plan either, but that is why it is a compromise. The plan offers serious governmental reforms that will both increase accountability and oversight over the administrative agencies and stabilize our budget for future economic downturns. And it provides revenues that will bring certainty and stability to the services we provide Oklahomans, as well as a $5,000 across-the-board pay raise for our state's public school teachers. I am optimistic that members in the House, both Republican and Democratic, can come together, compromise, and solve our budget issues quickly so we can move on to other important policy work that will move our state forward. End of quote from Oklahoma House Speaker Charles McCall. Now, what jumped out at you? Was it the word compromise? Maybe so, because it was used 3 times. And along with the other spin about, and really over promises about what this plan will do, I don't think it will bring certainty and stability. In some areas, it would be an improvement, but it would not certainly be the end of the matter, as the Step Up Oklahoma people would, and apparently Mr. McCall, Speaker McCall, would have you believe. So again, do your homework, look into it. Oh, also I wanted to say, he said, look at this sentence. A much-needed teacher pay raise is still the top priority for House Republicans, but anytime you say top priority, but warning signs should go up. But we need to identify a revenue stream to fund that commitment. Well, you know what? If it's a top priority, you will find a revenue stream. So apparently the real top priority is finding a revenue stream. So let's get there. How about that? All right, so that's all I got today. I'm just like, sometimes you feel like you're just like yelling into the void here. But I think more and more Oklahomans are waking up, standing up, and doing something about the mess that our government has created at the hands of conservatives who just cannot let go of the idea that cutting taxes, cutting taxes will be the solution to everything, will magically make the economy improve and trickle down to everybody. I guess they were planning on having some of that fairy dust that worked for my name change. But you know what? After, 40 years or more? Clearly not working. Give that up. So please contact your representatives, your senators, and let them know time is nigh. They're going to try to get this step-up plan through quickly. Unlike almost everything else, with the Oklahoma legislature, they really want to ram this through. So make those calls. Thank you very much. And thank you for listening to this podcast once again, or even for the first time. This is now called Left in Oklahoma, formerly Pointing Left, and I am Serena Blaze, your host. I really appreciate you listening. I really appreciate you giving me any feedback that you might have, any ideas for things you want me to cover, any corrections, anything at all. I just would like to hear from you, a little post on Facebook, an email, whatever the case may be. OklahomaActivist.com is where you can go to find contact information, where you can find past episodes of this podcast. Again, it will be labeled, the past ones will be labeled Pointing Left. Those going forward will be labeled Left in Oklahoma. So, what the hell? Figure it out. Change is good. See you next week. Goodbye.